You may have seen the gambling movie called 21 about a group of MIT students that use card counting and their superior grasp of numbers to win millions of dollars at the blackjack table. But would you be surprised to find out that story was based on true events? Even more surprising is that there have been quite a few cases of people beating the odds when it comes to gambling. Join us as we have a look at some people who beat the casino. NIKRASCH. Now we begin with a guy whose method of beating the casino was sophisticated but not very complex, while at the same time incredibly intricate. The name of this genius was NIKRASCH. Once upon a time, he was an accomplished locksmith in Chicago, and it's said that there was not a single lock in the world that he was not able to crack if he had his toolbox with him. Such talents actually attracted some of the less savory people in Chicagoland, and eventually his ties to various crime families would put him in jail for nearly a decade. When he was released, he wasn't ready to go back into the regular 9-to-5 job of picking locks. However, he did want to put his talents to good use. Dennis eventually ran into a group of people who told him that there were millions of dollars to be made in rigging slot machines in Vegas, and the only thing they needed was a guy who could unlock the side of the machines. Dennis could see nothing but dollar signs in his eyes, and once the side of the machine was opened, the locksmith would then insert a computer chip that would allow the user to always win the higher amounts of money. He then packed up his things and moved to Vegas, and then he hired a few local family members to block the views of cameras as he inserted the chips and a few friends to play the slot machines. NIKRASCH would run this racket for nearly 7 years until he was caught, but by that time he had already amassed a $10 million fortune on slot machines. After serving time for his crimes, he then returned to Vegas years later and ran the same scam for 2 more years until he was caught once again. And in those 2 years, he had already gained another $6 million. It would seem as though Mr. NIKRASCH just didn't know how to quit when he was ahead. JOAN GINTHER. After this next story, you might think that JOAN GINTHER made a deal with the devil, or she may just be one of the smartest people in history. While this doesn't specifically cover casinos, it does deal with the most popular form of gambling, the lottery. Now, there's a possibility that you may have heard the name JOAN GINTHER, as she's often referred to as the lottery legend who won over $2 million on 4 separate occasions. As most people know, you've probably got a better chance of being struck by lightning than you do winning the lottery. So how in the world did JOAN achieve 4 historic wins? We think that her PhD in statistics from Stanford probably came in handy. Close friends of GINTHER were able to detail the strategy that she used, which was rather similar to that of a professional gambler. By that, we mean that she took control of some of the loopholes in the system. The first loophole was the return on her initial investment. Most people think of lottery tickets as a win-it-all or lose-it-all situation, when in fact there is a little bit of a gray area. Many lottery tickets have small to medium-sized prizes that can be retrieved, and some of them are as small as 1 free ticket or a few dollars. However, some can be as large as a few $1,000s. GINTHER was able to calculate that even if she never won a large cash prize from numerous rolls of lottery tickets, she would, at the minimum, recover about 66% of her money. Now, as far as gambling goes, a loss of 1/3 of your investment isn't all that bad. JOAN would soon learn that if she repeated the process, she was able to reinvest and further mitigate the costs involved. Eventually, she would be able to get $25,000 out of $25 worth of tickets for an out-of-pocket cost of just $8,275 in the end. The next loophole that GINTHER took advantage of was the federal and state tax laws. Most people don't know that gambling losses can actually be written off against gambling wins. Now, it would help quite a few people if this was written on every lottery ticket in every gas station in the country. On top of those who declare themselves as professional gamblers, they're able to write off numerous business expenses. Expenses like travel and lodging. Ginther's ingenious plan to maximize her odds of winning didn't end there. Maybe the most important loophole is that she capitalized on the information that the Texas Lottery would release to the public. For example, the number of winning lottery tickets that are still in play, and the number of tickets that have been purchased. Because of this major piece of information, GINTHER would constantly fly to Texas to buy her lottery tickets, and she had a statistical map of the playing field. It's a good thing that she was able to write those flights off on her taxes. As information was released on how many tickets remained, GINTHER would surge her investments based on the numbers. In a similar fashion to how people play the stock market or how card counters bet in blackjack. Despite all of these mathematical tactics, it's estimated that her best odds were around 1 in 800,000, but this was more than enough to give GINTHER confidence. While no concrete number has been given, it is assumed that GINTHER invested a few million into this strategy, and it looks like she came out on top. Some might refer to it as science, but we still think that there was a fair bit of luck involved. For example, her first lottery win used none of the techniques. GINTHER just happened to buy a ticket and then won $5.4 million. She used the money to fuel her lottery addiction. And if it weren't for that initial win, there probably would have been no way for her to bring the insane odds down to a not-so-great 1 in 800,000. Don Johnson, the man who broke Atlantic City. Don Johnson has one of the most successful blackjack stories other than that of the MIT blackjack team. The only difference is that he was just one man. One who made $15 million in under 6 months rather than a few decades. Before his winning streak, Johnson was heavily involved in the gambling industry and often served as a manager or executive in gambling-related businesses. He even founded his own business that allowed for computer-assisted wagering and betting for horse races. It was through these various businesses and high-ranking jobs that allowed him to amass a small personal fortune. Johnson had been a lifetime blackjack player and was even known to be very skilled within his inner circles. Sadly, though, for the casinos, they were not in his inner circles. They were in the midst of recovering from the 2008 financial crisis, and during this time, gambling was at an all-time low. So that's when the casinos decided to go out and search for high rollers to join some of their games. The thought was that they could possibly make their money off of wealthy guests in large sums, rather than to wait for the middle class to regain the financial footing needed to come back and gamble. In their desperation, they would turn to a man that they really didn't fully understand. Don Johnson answered their call and capitalized on their desperation. He would request multiple minor changes to the game, ones that provided him the slightest mathematical edge. Now, maybe his most egregious change to the rules was that dealers had to stay on soft 17s rather than the tradition of being forced to hit. In addition to this, he would ask for a 20% refund on his losses, which was not completely insane, but still another precautionary negotiation made by Johnson in order to protect himself in the long run. The games finally began, and Johnson was playing $100,000 hands on the regular. He famously played an $800,000 hand which kicked off his 6-month winning streak. During his run, he crippled the monthly profits of 3 casinos. He took Caesars for $4 million, the Borgata for $5 million, and the Tropicana for $6 million. In 6 months, he made $15.1 million and decimated Atlantic City. The casinos felt as though they were being kicked while they were down, and their CEOs were so bitter that they effectively banned Johnson from their establishments. Oh, and those who didn't ban him have set a limit on how much he's allowed to win before he's forced to leave. Don Johnson may very well be the best gambler of all time. The MIT Blackjack Team. The MIT Blackjack Team is one that you more likely have heard about. You may have first heard about them in the 2008 movie 21, which might be the reason that card counting became a mainstream interest. In the movie, various MIT students would join a club consisting of other students and former students who specialize in various card counting techniques. The older and the former students would teach the younger ones, who are then brought into the casinos to test out their skills. Their card counting technique was an intricate system that involved multiple players at and away from the table. The MIT students would use a combination of methods like ace tracking and hand signals. That way they could gain the advantage over the house. What surprises most people, though, is that the MIT Blackjack team existed for decades, first forming in 1979. At its peak, it would have about 80 team members and would travel around the world hustling casinos for incredible amounts of money, which would then be divided up or reinvested. As you may or may not know, card counting is actually frowned upon in casinos, and while it is technically legal, the casino has every right to kick you out and ban you from the premises. Members from the team were often caught and needed to be replaced by new recruits. And at the height of the MIT Blackjack team's success, the casinos were so paranoid about losing money that they then hired private investigators to look into the team. They procured yearbooks and created databases of MIT and Harvard students as a preventative measure. And in some cases, they even flat-out refused service to people with Cambridge addresses. The team eventually disbanded in the late 90s after an internal split and a loss of interest in the endeavor. With casinos becoming more and more secure and there being lack of leadership within the group, the team eventually disappeared into nothing. Gambling has never been the most lucrative of career paths, but if you have the intellect of one of the people on our list, you might want to give it a quick look. This has been a small look at some of the people who have beat the casino and managed to beat the odds. Let us know some of your favorite gamblers in the comments below, and thanks for watching. Now, if there's one thing we've learned in the last decade, it's that there's no such thing as privacy. There are now consequences for social media rants, as nothing's really undiscoverable. It's a life lesson that many have learned, and figured out that even freedom of speech has its consequences.